matters of life, and what comes next. That's what we're diving into in this episode of What's Next? Living Longer, Better, Smarter. This episode is made possible by Child Free Trust, serving people without kids, making decisions on their behalf for them when they can't, serving as power of attorney, executor, and trustee. Rely on Child Free Trust and their comprehensive nationwide estate solution. Learn more at childfreetrust.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Fred. I'm very excited about the guests we have with us today, and I think everyone watching and listening will find it time well spent.
I'm sure they will. We'll be hearing from Stephen Cohn, Vice President of Development for Strategic Initiatives at Capital Caring Health. But first, we have a remarkable best-selling author of fiction and nonfiction, sounds like a relative of mine, a journalist and a broadcaster, C.G. Ware. Hi, C.G.
Hi, everybody. So good to see you both.
Yes, CJ and I are friends, and I'm so happy to have you with us. You were a guest on the very first episode, a tribute to Gail Sheehy, and
Yeah.
this is episode 99. So, wow, thank you, Fred, for all you've done.
Fred,
Um,
yeah, you said, and you know that I happened to run across that the other day of our friend Gail Sheehy, who everybody knows was a wonderful writer and TV person and a good friend and a fellow Cavalier King Charles Spaniel owner with me. And it just made me so nostalgic. I'm so glad we got it on camera.
It was beautiful. Well, CG, it's been 19 years since your book, Right Sizing Your Life, was first published. The Wall Street Journal called it one of the top 5 books about retirement. And now, get ready, everyone. Here comes a sequel, Right Sizing After 70, Decluttering, Divesting, and Deciding Who Gets What. This is still in the final production stages, CG?
Yes, it's going to come out over the summer. I finished the first draft, thank goodness, and now I've got to edit. And it has some of the information of the first book. I had to get this from Abe Books. It's out of print now. You can still find it somewhere. This was the original book for general audiences. And a lot of the sort of prescription part of, do this, get this box, do that is the same. But I am over 70. And I just realized that this is a different subject when you're, quote, right sizing and you're facing, the final chapters of your life. And it's a very different process we are finding ourselves. So I decided, typical me, write a book about it. So that's what I've done.
and CJ, I just have to talk a little bit about our friendship. So I remember you when you were the weather girl, right? At City.
No, no, I was called the consumer reporter, but it was really how to freeze fish, kind of home ec when I first started 37 years ago on camera. And then I ended up being a health and lifestyle reporter, which was very interesting. I was a doctor, but I didn't have a license for ABC for 18 years in LA. And, I've matured over, I covered politics and I covered the Karen Silkwood trial. I did a lot of different things. But I did start out one step above the weather girl.
And so I remember when you sold your house in Bel Air and then moved to Sausalito, and I came to visit you there and saw you were in a much smaller space. And then
4,000 square feet down too.
right. And then like many of our listeners, you created an encore career and became a historical fiction writer, which we went to the party when you wrote the story about Julia Morgan and the building of the Fairmont Hotel. So always have had an affection for Julia Morgan as a builder and think of her as a role model. But also, almost every conversation I hear with my friends is about right sizing their life. And so tell us. I think both of us are over 75, right? What is different at this stage of your life when you think about right sizing?
Well, I think there's certain things start to happen. You, like we did, you lose a good friend who's a contemporary. Gail was a little older than we are, but she died during COVID and it was really a shock. And they're triggering events that start to happen. Somebody gets sick. Somebody has to move away. People get divorced. I mean, all kinds of things happen. And you are sort of faced with, oh my gosh, I'm now 70 plus. And I have a lot of stuff. Americans are huge consumers, as we all are. I mean, just look at my background. You're nice and tidy, I must say, Mary, but Fred's got some stuff back there. We just have accumulated a lot of things. So there's certain trigger things that begin to make you realize, as my father said on the day he died, darling, nobody gets out of this joint alive, that we are going to just have to face. And either we start taking care of things and we make our lives simpler and safer, which is one of the things. We get rid of the rugs that would trip us and the footstools that we fall over. And also, either we do it or our poor relatives do it. And if you've ever had to clean out somebody else's house, you love them, but you curse them. And so I thought, these are the kinds of events that get us to think it's not just about a move, as I did. I moved from, 4,000 square feet to San Francisco during the dot-com explosion where there was no room at the inn, and we were lucky to get a one-bedroom apartment. And so you just realize your life changes, and certainly after 70, your life is definitely going to change. And things happen. So better to start sorting things out and figuring things out while you still can. And so that was it's really the message of the new book. And here's how to do it.
And there's some sticky issues, right?
Oh, yeah. I think that's why I had different subtitles for right sizing after 70. And I ended up with the one of decluttering for safety, divesting, which is getting rid of stuff you don't need, and then the part deciding who gets what. And I have a wonderful chapter in this book that didn't make it in the first book about my friend from college, Ellie Cabot, who was a Cabot. The Cabots speak only to God in Boston, right? And she herself worked as a worker all her life because she didn't think she was going to inherit anything. But when her parents died, there were four kids, and they had had relatives who just squabbled and fought and, went into suits and ruined family relations. And her brother thought up of an amazing system for how you divide things in a way that's fair and everybody walks away still friends. So that's a whole chapter in one book. And then in this book, and then there's another section really about if somebody has died, what do you do? But a lot of it is the psychology of how do we let go in a way that makes us happy and makes us feel better. And the simplification process is liberating. And I'm doing it right now again. And the more you begin to divest yourself of the things you don't love, you don't use, you don't need, you free yourself up to enjoy the time we have left. And I
I did
think,
say it's like weight loss, but I have a question. What if no one wants your stuff? So, like they say, they don't want the brown furniture, they don't want the
they
china.
don't want anything. I have a 54-year-old son who has three children, and they want nothing. They're all restoration hardware. They're taupe and stainless steel and photographs, of objects. They don't want your family photographs. They don't want anything. I mean, it's really shocking. I had a goddaughter. She wanted the china, thank goodness. But it's really a shock when you have strived all your life, you collected things that you thought were wonderful, and you turns out your kids, they literally don't want it.
And
So
but one other thing, we don't have those dinner parties like we had before, where you have multiple people don't entertain quite the same way, right?
well, things are changing. And I think one of the big lessons that I've learned is that in our careers as journalists and as we've had to be flexible and learn new things. Well, certainly lifestyle issues, you're absolutely right. You don't need service for 12. You probably need service for 6 if you even have anybody over at this age and stage. So you begin to say, what do I need now to make me happy and to fulfill what I need to do and need to have? And when you start looking at that, you realize your life has changed and it's going to change more. That's the other thing. I mean, somebody may end up in assisted living, somebody may end up living with their daughters or their sons, and it's going to change. So just pare down to what you really need. Now, have you heard of this? I had never heard of it till I did the research. The Swedish death cleaning. Have you heard about that? I
Yes.
had never heard of it. It's an attitude in Scandinavia that after 70, you start simplifying your lifestyle in terms of possessions as an act of kindness to your relatives, and also for safety's sake for yourself and for getting it down so it's manageable and serves you well. And it sounded sort of horrible, but when I really looked into what the process was, I thought, my gosh, that's a pretty interesting thing. And apparently it's quite prominent in Scandinavia that you hit 70 and you got to do this.
Antiques Roadshow, here I come, right?
Well, that's the thing. Who wants it? There are places. Antiques Roadshow is one. We hope it comes to a city near you. But also, I'm learning eBay, Etsy. I'm learning these are world markets where if you can learn to do it or hire someone to do it, you post all your stuff that has some value and that and today I made my first sale on eBay. So I'm very excited. But there are solutions for every problem. That's the one thing I learned in doing both books, that no matter what the problem is, there is a solution, but it takes time. So you can't do this process overnight. And if my message is anything to all of us is that don't delay. Start little by little by little because it cannot be done quickly. Otherwise, it's a big mess for somebody else.
Are there other planning steps that we should be keeping in mind here? I don't want to give away the whole book,
Yeah.
but what can you tell us?
Well, I think that the main thing is number one, to recognize nobody gets out of this life alive. I mean, it's so hard to accept. I mean, we're all vital, we're all doing stuff. It's really hard to say this is going to happen. But just like tomorrow is going to be Thursday or Friday or whatever day it's going to be, it's coming. So that's the first step, is just acceptance is the key, and then begin to look around. And sometimes it's sort of overwhelming, and one of the best suggestions I've had is you start with the stuff you really don't care about, which would be what's in your garage, what's in your basement, what's in, if you have an attic, where are the things that you really don't care about. And I have a clutter buddy. I have a friend who's my age, and we're helping each other. I helped her, got rid of her old spices that were like 10 years old, and she's going to help me with some stuff here. So getting another friend is makes it more fun. But also just starting small, literally starting with a drawer, pull it out, put only back what you use and need and maybe love, and the rest start getting rid of. Now, the problem is the landfills are getting full, so it's going to cost you money to throw away things. So I have a directory in the back of this book that I have to update, but it's all the places that will take things. Like, the vet will take your scrungy towels that they're clean but they're ratty. They'll take it. Or, you won trophies because you played bocce ball. The Boys and Girls Club will take off the label and they'll put in, there are places, but you have to be sort of creative. So that's the other reason I wrote this book, because I want to help people. It's hard to think up all those clever little ways of unloading things. There was one guy I know that had loved woodworking. So he found a trade school and he gave all of his saws and his all that stuff to a trade school. But it takes some doing. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to write a guide to help you out, because it took me like 20 years. Here we are writing the second book to gather enough information that might help people.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I find when you have grandchildren, you make room in your heart and your life for them and for their toys, and they each have a drawer of things they can play with. And so, in some ways, we need to clear the clutter to have the white space to think about our own planning in the future. And nobody dresses like we did in the 80s, 90s, year 2000. It's seldom we go to the office. And so clothes is another category that,
Clothes, I think the big categories are clothes, collections. Like I had a friend who collected silver mustard pots. She had tons of them. The market for that wasn't huge. I mean, eBay is the only place you could probably do something with. But the biggest category for a lot of people is paperwork. And
Oh,
and there are lots of ways to solve that, but so when you begin to look at the various categories, um, that's that's really the key of beginning the whole process. And if in my case, books, I mean, I've written 17 novels, and the last four were all about World War II. I have 120 or 30 books just on World War II. So I'm thinking, okay, the library will take them and they'll probably pulp them and make money to buy newer books. Is there anywhere where World War II, some library, somewhere might want those? You sort of hate to just throw them out and give them up. So books are a huge category in my life, but think about your own life. I mean, Mary, what would be the biggest category for you if you had to get rid of everything tomorrow?
Um, it's funny that you asked that because books would be one of the categories. And clearly paperwork is another category. And I'm doing this conference in a couple of weeks on longevity and AI, and the world is moving so fast. There's so much we need to learn about the new world of work that a lot of the things are kind of irrelevant. And yet some
Totally
of the books
relevant.
but some of the books that I have, and I always read in print. In fact, your book, Race to Splendor, was my choice for the book club last year that I'm in.
Oh,
And
thanks.
it was a summer in my garden, and everyone really loved the book, as did I. So I have trouble giving rid of books that either I wrote or my friends wrote. And every now and then in social media, I'll post a picture of a book. Like I have one with my son when he was 5 on the cover, and my first Macintosh. It was the history of Apple, and I had the first Mac. So I'm not going to give away that book, you know?
Well,
And
the sentimental is the biggest category. That's the heart. It's not the biggest necessarily, but it's the hardest.
right.
And
And how
and
can it help our photographs? I mean, we have photographs that were taken with Polaroid cameras, right?
yeah,
And so there's all those
I
things.
have a solution. See, that was me too. I had thousands. I had 64 in one house. I had 64 frames with pictures in them, and couldn't do it. What I did, and my son, who's a professional photographer, cinematographer, he was so annoyed at me. I took pictures of the picture, and then he gave me this thing called an electronic revolving um, picture frame, where you just from your iPhone, you download all those pictures onto this thing, and it revolves, and you see your life pass before you all day long. But I got rid of the paper pictures. It was a wrench. But I took pictures of the pictures. They weren't first generation. Jamie said you could have scanned it, blah, blah. I said, I'll never do that. So I just took pictures of pictures. It's on this Aura, the one I have, and it solved the problem. And I held my nose and I threw out the paper pictures, except I kept, and this is the whole thing about sentimental issues, I kept some of the archival 1880 family black and whites because I'm going to give them to my son, whether he wants them or not.
That's so. Fred, tell us. I know you have an archive of magazines and books and have
What's
come.
your problem, Fred? What can I help you
Well,
with?
I've been covering consumer technology for about 30 years now, reviewing a lot of stuff. And some stuff I've held on to, like someday I'm going to use this, and I never will. So I guess making the decision to get rid of a lot of that
Well,
is,
and it's interesting. What I realize is that when you hold on to something because you might need it in the future, you're living in the future. If you say, "Oh, I can't give it up," you're living in the past. But there are solutions. I was thinking, there's that big tech museum. Uh, what about your whole collection, offering it to them? Because you're an archive for them, and maybe they'll digitize everything, but it won't go away. I had a friend who was a cookbook writer. She had 6,000 cookbooks in her house. They lined her walls, they lined the guest room, they were everywhere. And she said an earthquake, they'd all be killed by cookbooks landing on them. So she called her alma mater that happened to have an archive about food. And she said, if you come get these, they're yours. And she had some very wonderful ones, like an 1880 Mrs. Beaton cookbook. She had some kind of goodies that she knew they'd want. And so she enticed them with that. And so lo and behold, this big truck came to her house. They took 6,000 cookbooks and gave them to the museum. So you have to be, you can't always pull that off. But if you're creative, and think about it and have time to think about it starting at 70, you can come up with some pretty good solutions.
You know, I taught women in leadership at Santa Clara for 24 years, and I always would bring books to my class and bring in guest speakers. And then I always gave the books to the students. So that was a way of just
Right.
populating the next generation. But we spend so much time at our computers these days. I've been doing kind of teas in the garden at my house. And what I'm going to do next time is just ask people to take things with them, because like another thing is they might treasure that teacup. You
Right.
and so it's a kind of a way to pass things on. And I think there's nothing more that we want to pass on to the next generation than the books that have inspired us. And sometimes that's hard to get rid of, like Gail Sheehy's books on passages, or Rick Moody's book on Five Stages of the Soul. Those are perennial books on my bookshelf because I may want to go back and reread those books.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. You keep the things that have true meaning to you. And one of the things I learned doing both books is that our things we have feelings about them. And that's why it's so hard to give things up sometimes.
Right.
And until you realize, okay, what is my feeling about about passages, which our friend Gail wrote? Well, it said it really was a seminal book. It changed people's lives. I mean, we suddenly have a midlife crisis. She invented that word, and she was our friend. So I'm not going to, when I'm dead, someone can either take that book and do whatever they want with it, but I'm not giving it up. And I think that's the way you make choices is do I love it? Do I need it? But does it mean something really important to me? Now, I have the weirdest example because I do some consulting and speaking and all that. And I had a woman that asked me to come over to her house because she and her husband, her second husband, were about to get divorced because there's no room in their closet because she kept the wedding dress from her first marriage in the closet, taking up all this room. And I said, why? What does it mean to you? And she burst out crying. She said, I knew the marriage was never going to work. I felt it walking down the aisle in my $25,000 wedding dress, and my parents had spent all this money. I just feel so guilty. I said, well, what if you gave that dress to these places where, you give it to where people don't have the money to buy a wedding dress or a nice suit for work? And we took pictures of it on the bed, forward and back, and you had a memory of it, but you let it go because it would make your husband and you feel a lot better about your current life. And she did it. So, it showed to me that she had these feelings that were negative feelings, but she wouldn't let go. So when we really, have something important to us, I think we have to say why. And once we think it's still important and I'm going to hold on to it, or I can find a new home. There's a thing of giving it away to the universe. And it's kind of like your teacup idea, where you've enjoyed it, you want someone else to enjoy it, and you're fine with letting it go if it goes to a home where you think it'll be appreciated like you did.
Well, Fred, this has been a lot of fun, and CG, always great to spend time with you. And I think it's a process where the closer you get to the finite, the more you want to have things in good order. And it's a call to all of us to do that. I hate to start with the garage. I like the idea of starting with a drawer and then pruning
One
from
drawer,
that.
one corner of one room, and
Right.
making that okay, or taking your pots and pans and saying, I only need a big frying pan and a medium frying pan, and I'm going to release the other ones to the universe. It's just small things, but the big thing about right sizing as opposed to downsizing, it's a process. It's not an event. So if we just start with some consciousness that it's a process and we can do it in small steps with some help, we can get through it, and we're going to feel liberated, I think. At least I'm looking forward to getting rid of some of this stuff.
Thank you, CG. The
You're
upcoming
welcome.
title again is Right Sizing After 70, Decluttering, Divesting, and Deciding Who Gets What. Mary, that was the Matters of Life portion of this episode. And for the What Comes Next portion, our guest is Stephen Cohn, Vice President of Development for Strategic Initiatives at Capital Caring Health. Hi, Stephen.
Fred, thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it. Look forward to the discussion.
Stephen, thank you for taking the time to join us. Capital Caring Health has become a leader in hospice, palliative care, and counseling in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Tell us more about the background, and I think these are some of the least understood concepts for the population.
Sure. Happy to. Well, first, going back in time, Capital Caring was the first organization to offer hospice care in the DC metro market. It was the first in the state of Virginia, the first in the Mid-Atlantic, and the second oldest hospice in the nation. And we are celebrating our 50th year next year, 2027. And during this period of 50 years, we have cared for over 200,000 patients, plus hundreds of thousands of family members during this journey. And we do provide palliative care, which is another name for chronic illness care. Though our major mission is providing end-of-life care, hospice care for people with a terminal condition that indicates that two doctors agree that they have 6 months or less to live. I wish more people took advantage of the hospice benefit, because a family trying to go it alone with a loved one with a terminal condition is extremely stressful. Sometimes more so for the family than the patient or the caregiver, the spouse or grandson or granddaughter, whoever it is. If there are no family, that's another issue that we deal with. But the point is, hospice care is for the whole family. And we provide counseling to family members. We explain the journey that their loved one is on. Our team includes not just doctors and nurses, but social workers, non-denominational chaplains. And when the patient passes, we provide free bereavement care to all family members for as long as necessary at no charge, which is something that's not even covered by insurance, but we view that as part of our mission. The biggest misconception of hospice care is, and why more people don't take advantage of this wonderful benefit, is either the patient, the family, the patient's primary physician, or all of them say, well, if I go into hospice, I'm giving up on life, right? And we have lots of proof that the opposite is true. The sooner you enter hospice, the longer you have to enjoy life, whether it's weeks or months. And how I like to say it, as well as other folks here at Capital Caring, is hospice is about celebrating life, not the end of life. So in the time the patient has remaining, they should, if we're true to our mission, we're helping them enjoy the time they have. Many patients, believe it or not, for instance, want to get married to a longtime loved one before they die. We do that all the time. Some patients want to have meals with their friends. They want to see grandkids in events that the kids are in. They may just want to be taken outdoors to enjoy a nice day. All of these things are efforts that we make to help them enjoy life and, have the dignity to be able to do that. And of course, one reason that that's possible is because 95% of the time we're taking care of the patient where they live, whatever they call home.
Mhm.
It can be a residence, it can be an assisted living facility, it can be a nursing home, it can be kid that they live with their kids, whatever it is, or the kids live with them, whatever they call home. And there are two reasons that folks who enter hospice care always live longer, proven again and again and again. One is they just mentally feel better, emotionally feel better, not being in a hospital room. Easy to understand that, where visitors can come and go, there are no restrictions. And many of them have live pets that they, sharers who are there. So the home experience is always a huge positive, which the hospitals agree with. They don't want patients dying in their facilities. They want them back home. The second reason hospice care very often extends life is because patients are not being overly medicated at the point where it becomes counterproductive and can, in fact, create premature death. So an example, at some point, chemotherapy in many cases should be stopped, not continued. And in hospice care, we're not trying to cure the adults anymore. Our main mission is to make them as comfortable and pain-free as possible. But curative medications are not part of what hospice is all about, with one exception, and that is for children. So Capital Caring also is the largest children's hospice organization in the nation. On any given day, we care for around 90 children and their families, more than St. Jude's, which is about a 70-bed hospital. A different situation, but and for children, a law was passed that we helped get passed in 2010 that indicates that we also try to cure the child while they're in hospice care, not just make them pain-free and comfortable. And children are defined in the Medicare rules as 29 and under, but our average child patient is 8 years old. So the term is concurrent care for the children. And many of them have birth defects, which we actually can fix. Sometimes with cancer, it goes in remission, as you know. So about 15% of the time, we're able to prolong a child's life, sometimes for normal longevity.
Yesterday I judged the Stanford Business Plan competition for students around the world. And one of the ideas was a team, I think, from India that wanted to help girls understand what had happened when they started their period. And I was so interested in, so you get this book and say, this is what's going to happen to you next. And
Yeah.
When you get to end of life issues, there's no little book that makes it easy for people to say, really, the work
Well,
you're doing is so important because, CG was talking about after 75, both she and I are older, 75 and older, about people not wanting to get rid of their things. But it's a whole daunting moment when there's the diagnosis that you get that your time is more limited. And so tell us about this difficult passage for people and what we should be planning and thinking about when it comes to this life stage, because I don't think there's a guidance counselor as much as there needs to be.
well, right. And, the knowledge among the medical community goes from okay to poor. So, and that's because doctors and nurses go through nursing school and medical school and almost always never hear about hospice end of life care. It's not taught. And that's their mission is to cure people, not to care for them when they're terminal. So that's not helpful, of course, in many cases when the family is looking for information. Um, we actually, Capital Caring created a really easy to read guide to hospice care for caregivers, which is not verbose, it's not very long, but it goes through all the major points about when is the right time for hospice care for a loved one, and what should you expect, and is it costly? No, it's almost always free of charge. And also another thing we point out, which is, gosh, it's a difficult kind of thing because the consumer, if you will, has no idea that there are two types of hospice organizations, for-profit and not-for-profit. And of course, we're nonprofit. 15 years ago, 85% of the 6,500 hospice organizations were nonprofit. Today, only 15% are.
Wow. Why the change?
A private equity decided that um, the terminally ill is a growth market because of the baby boomers, and that there was a lot of money to be made. And so I think that's a tragedy, personally. And I don't think it ever should have been allowed, but that cat, so to speak, is out of the bag, as I indicated. And my point is that people should know that there's a choice in most parts of the country that they have to select a nonprofit or a for-profit. And it's been proven in many studies that nonprofits provide superior care. It's not to say that every for-profit doesn't do a decent job, but the fact is that their focus, their their mission, if you will, is to have a margin minimum 15% and sometimes as high as 30%. We nonprofits are happy if we get 1%. And so, we take complicated cases that the for-profits tend to not want. They don't want to go often to an individual's home. They want to go to a nursing home or assisted living facility where they can care for many patients at the same time. They don't do, for the most part, any kind of bereavement counseling. It's very minimal. If sometimes it's just a postcard saying sorry for your loss. And almost all for-profits do not provide inpatient facilities. The nonprofits provide 99% of those. Capital Caring runs 3 of them, 2 in Virginia and 1 in Washington, D.C. The inpatient hospice facility is needed about 5% of the time for patients that literally need around-the-clock care to make sure they're pain-free and comfortable. And so in our facilities, we have a nurse assigned to every 2 patients 24/7. And family can come and go at all hours of the day and night. There are no visiting hours. It's always available. Family members can stay with their loved one overnight or for the whole time the patient is there. Average stay is probably 2 to 3 weeks. And it's also a very non-hospital-like experience because it's usually it's a standalone structure in a residential community, and it's made to look like a home,
That's
not a
nice.
hospital.
And as you alluded to before, Stephen, people, patients, and families are cared for regardless of their ability to pay.
Correct. And also, regardless of their citizenship status. So they don't have to be an American citizen. They just have to live in our service area. So we care for everyone regardless of race, citizenship status, or ability to pay.
You make it feel like a home.
Ability to pay means they either have Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance, which doesn't cover the whole tab for the nonprofits, not even remotely. But that's why philanthropy is so important for us as well.
And you've done a brilliant job with philanthropy. Um, you make it feel like at home. Sometimes you even provide pets. Is that right?
Yes. So about 6 years ago, I've been with Capital Carrying for 7 years. So 1 year into it, I decided that we should have a robotic pet program. And I learned about the pets when I was running membership and partnerships at AARP, which is what that's why I moved down to Washington and left Wall Street to work at a nonprofit. And the robotic pet program has been a huge success. And there are many clinical studies that point out what I see and our staff sees, our volunteers, our clinical staff see every day, which is the robotic pets um, really provide joy and comfort, especially for dementia sufferers. Sometimes their whole personality changes, often instantaneously, from agitated, confused, sometimes physically aggressive, unfortunately, to, like I said, calm, joyful, and much more interactive with other people. And they usually keep the pet with them around the clock, whether it's a dog, a cat, or a bird that we provide. They usually name it. Sometimes they think it's a pet from the past that's come back. And so if the person's living in an assisted living facility or nursing home, I make two major points. One is this pet is not a communal pet. It's for that particular patient that it was provided to. If the patient wants to, let others pet it, interact with it, whether it's staff, other patients, family members, of course, fine. It's the patient's choice. The other thing is a lot of these facilities have one therapy dog. And I also want the staffs of those facilities to know that that dog will not be put off by the robotic pets because the robotic pets have no scent. So live pets, like at home, my two live cats, I have robotic pets scattered all over the home. They ignore them totally because they can't smell them. And therefore, as far as a live pet is concerned, they don't exist. So when you think about the fact that a $180 dog or cat can dramatically improve the life of a dementia sufferer or a terminally ill child, I mean, what a wonderful thing.
And of course, that's
And
our friend Ted Fisher at Age
yes,
Patient, who we've been collaborating with for over a decade. And we've just seen the joy on the faces of people that have come from this. Steve and I once asked, when I was going from one company to another, I asked my mentor, "What what should I do next?" He said, "You should shine a light on people and causes that matter." So you have certainly done that in this role that you have at Capital Caring. You've really taken an issue and made it front and center. I'm currently reading a book about the history of hospitality and the root word hospice, which is in hotels and other things. So tell us, over the years, what's changed with hospice and palliative care?
well, I think what's changed is that fortunately more people have come to understand what an amazing benefit it is. And, the numbers point that out. 10 years ago, maybe 35 to 40% of those people eligible each year for hospice care would enroll. And today it's around nationwide, the average is 52%. So, that's on a percentage basis, that's a very nice improvement. Now, having said that, basically what that means is for every 100 people that have a terminal condition, 50 enroll and 50 don't. And we wish that, that was better. We wish that 70 or 80% or 80 of the 100 or 100 of the 100. That's not to say that in every case hospice is the solution, but it should be in almost every case.
Where can people get more information?
the NPHI website, NPHI, which stands for the National Partnership for Healthcare and Hospice Innovation. And that's an organization now about 130 nonprofit palliative care and hospice organizations across the country. That number is displayed prominently on the website, as well as you can type in the zip code where you want to find out about hospice care, and you'll get back all the nonprofits that are in that zip code area. We're grateful that these people choose that path to be part of our movement. And I call the nonprofit hospice effort a movement. For-profit is a business, we're a movement.
I like that. So, Stephen, thank you so much for the great work you're doing and for sharing such an important subject that's only going to get bigger in the next 10 years as people deal with grief and loss and what kind of friend are they through these passages. So thank you and your team for the services that you provide.
Yes, thank you for having me on today.
Thank you, Stephen. The site for more info is capitalcaring.org, or you can go to nphihealth.org. Now, before we go, for those working in the longevity field, a reminder about the upcoming Longevity Ventures Summit. Mary, it looks like another great conference slated for June.
Yes, our 23rd Longevity Venture Summit, featuring some of the top leaders in senior housing, home care, the NIA, which recently got funded, which I'm very excited about. And we'll have a lot of boot camps. We're giving a certificate for those who attend to learn about longevity and AI and the use cases in different categories like home care and senior housing. And if you're a listener, we also have a chance for you to come and learn how to use AI yourself. So it's at UC Berkeley. We're going to be collaborating with our academic partner, Citrus, and we're so pleased to be able to offer this new learning experience to the community of people that are building companies and investing in the space.
It is June 16th through the 18th in Berkeley. Learn more and register at longevityventuresummit.com. We want to thank our sponsor, Child Free Trust, the first comprehensive nationwide estate solution for child-free and permanently childless people, carrying out your wishes on your behalf. Learn more at childfreetrust.com. And of course, thanks to our guests, Stephen Cohn and C.G. Ware, and to all of you for watching or listening. Remember, you can always find more at maryfurlong.com/podcasts.